Characteristics of early civilizations. The growth of farming resulted in intensification, which had important consequences for social organization. Everyone's a lot closer together now. They need to be better organized. Larger groups gave rise to new challenges and required more sophisticated systems of administration. Complex societies took the forms of larger agricultural villages, farming towns. It could look like cities, city states, and states, a whole bunch of cities together under one government, which shared many features. A specialized labor gave rise to distinct social classes and enabled creative and innovative developments, like these Eastern Island heads or the ziggurats in the previous slide. Systems of record keeping and symbolic expression, like these guys here, grew more complex, and many societies had systems of writing as well. About 12,000 years ago, human communities started to function very differently than in the past. Rather than relying primarily on hunting or gathering food, many societies created systems for producing food. By about 10,000 BC, humans began to establish farming villages. This had massive ramifications on the social sphere, marking an important departure from past social systems. People lived in larger, denser, and more permanent settlements. Not everyone had to devote their full time to farming. Since there was no need for all residents to devote themselves full time to producing food, specialization within society was made possible. Thus, surplus food, as you can see here, that did not go directly to farmers' families was distributed to members of the society. Another notable effect of this new social order was the evolution of the idea of ownership. Contrary to migrating hunter gatherer bands, farmers invested a great deal of their time and energy into cultivating specific areas of land, their farms, and as such, they were attached to them. As this likely leads to disputes. Strong leaders and codes of conduct evolved in response. If you're going to have property, you have to have property laws, laws of ownership. The advent of agriculture did not happen simultaneously, meaning at the same time, and completely everywhere in the world. Some communities adopted farming earlier or more fully than others, and some did not adopt it at all. Despite this variability, however, farming undeniably revolutionized human history. Farming settlements spread rapidly all over the world. Humans had foraged for over 1,000,000 years, yet within the last 12,000, farming replaced foraging almost entirely. Very few foraging band systems survive today. So, what kinds of social changes resulted from this transformation of food production? The agricultural society, the farming people. Well, the surplus of food that farming systems could generate allowed for people to live in larger, more permanent villages. Villages were more productive, not only farmingly, but creatively. Sorry, I'm tired. They weren't only good at making food, but crafts like the pot you see here. People produced clothing, pottery, they made buildings, they made tools. They learned how to make metal, and with its sculptures and paintings, which were both directly tied to farming and to settlement in bigger villages. Farming began to process a process of intensification, which means that many more people could be sustained in a smaller area, since more calories could be produced per acre of land. They didn't have to spread out far to find food. They could get all their food in a smaller area. So everyone lived in a smaller area. Intensification. More people in a smaller area. As a result of this intensification, the world population rapidly rose. Between 10,000 and 1000 BC, the population of the world went from about 6 million to 120 million. With more people, societies needed to change in unprecedented ways and become more sophisticated with how they organize human life. While the agricultural revolution certainly had something to do with the development of increasingly complex society, there is considerable debate about why some farming societies ultimately developed into advanced civilizations while others did not. Indeed, in some cases, it seems like complex political orders were the cause rather than the consequence of the development of farming systems. Historians and anthropologists are still trying to understand what other variables were at play, such as large scale irrigation projects, warfare, trade, the geography, the level of competition. All could be factors why some societies become complex and others do not. Each society grew more complex in response to its own set of environment, its own society and political stimulus. Larger social groups form in various parts of the world, including the valleys of the Tigris Euphrates, that's in the Fertile Crescent, Mesopotamia. Another place large societies formed was the Nile River and the delta of the Nile River, which is in Egypt, the Indus Valley in India, Huang River in China, all allowed larger and denser settlements to emerge. These large concentrations of people are referred to as complex societies or civilizations. Civilization is just a complex society. And civilizations share many features, including having a dense population, cities, and a farming based economy, a social hierarchy. They have to have leaders, administrators. They have to have a division of labor, specialization, artisans, merchants, farmers, politicians, religious leaders. Um, they have to have a centralized government. They have to create monuments. They have to be record keepers and have writing and a complex system of belief or religion. These complex societies most often took shape in cities or city states like Urk and Ur. These first cities were nexuses of power, production, culture, and innovation. Sustaining these cities was not easy, however. It required extensive and often irreversible manipulation of the surrounding environment in order to extract energy in the forms of firewood by cutting down the trees, materials you dig out of the ground or kill the animals for, or dig up the rocks for building stone buildings. Take resources like food and water from the area till it's all gone. Because of this, these cities were very sensitive to fluctuations in weather and climate. A flood could destroy an entire supply of barley, for example, and a drought could make water supplies worryingly scarce. Because these societies were densely populated, disease, conflicts, and shortages were felt more dramatically and happened more often. An outbreak of disease could quickly become an epidemic. In response to these vulnerabilities, these communities developed ways to anticipate the changes in their natural environments, such as storing food, collecting and storing water. As these small communities developed from small villages to city states with thousands of residents, They were met with greater challenges and needed to develop mechanisms of social organization to address these obstacles more effectively. Better leadership. Civilizations evoke images of stone walls, monuments, and roads, but they are more than robust physical infrastructure. To facilitate the organization and administration of these large, dense communities, these first civilizations, people began to create social infrastructures. They made economies, political governments, religious institutions that went on to create new social hierarchies. These hierarchies were populated with people playing specialized roles such as professional administrators, farmers, artisans, traders, craftsmen, slave, nobles. Additionally, due to increased trade and conflict with external civilizations, cities required diplomats, armies, and centralized rulers who could respond to the threat. Most cities grew out of villages, and some ultimately became city states, which are self governing city centers in the agricultural territories under their control. So the city and the farmland around it. The surplus food production generated by villages in the vicinity allowed for some residents not to participate in farming, which led to the development of distinct specialized roles and associated classes. In order to facilitate cooperation between these many different classes and to organize large numbers of people to work together for the large scale construction of irrigation systems and monuments, pyramids, and other projects, leaders were required, comprising a new social class. Political leadership would take many different forms in the first civilizations. Though powerful states, centralized systems of government command and were the norm. States became very powerful. What do you think? Why do you think some societies adopted farming while others did not? Why do you think some farming societies did not develop into advanced civilizations? So you got farming, why didn't you take it the next step? Become advanced, create a king, and become more complex in your social hierarchy. Do you think that farming systems created cities and states in every case? Or is there evidence that states often created the conditions for farming systems? What kinds of political orders do you think were most common in early complex societies? Why?